So today, we are very grateful to have Professor Kola from the School of Construction, Economics and Management, which is basically the built environment side of the Faculty of Engineering, the built environment. And he will be talking to us today about setting the tone for your research. And Professor Kola is not new to us. So, I won't bore you with too much introduction. I believe that he has a lot of insight to share with us. Can I also suggest that you mute your mics and also your camera, and just so that we can allow Prof. Kola to have his camera on and also his presentation on. So he would, after the presentation, we will open up opportunities for people to ask questions, for people to your reflections and all that, so that at least we can do. So this is a conversation, and I must also say that this is a safe space. So feel free to air your views, and let's respect each other and tolerate each other so that we can make this a wonderful experience. On that note, Prof. Kola, over to you, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much, Desmond. And can I just be sure that you can all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, thanks very much. So my name is Kola, and like Desmond said, this is my school. For those of you on campus, you know the school. And for those of you that know the school very well, you can tell that it looks slightly different of late in the last couple of months, I think. The color is still the same, but then internally you should go visit sometimes. It's a beautiful place, I must say. Yeah, so that's where I work, and I'm the PG Research Coordinator. So my role makes me interact with many research students, both masters and PhD. Apart from the academic bit of things, I listen to people, so I have emotional connections with them, and I get to know some other things that are not purely academic, which in my experience constitutes about 50% of the research process. So in your journey, the academic bits of things, to be generous, I will put it at 60%, but I think 40% of success or otherwise are about some other softer issues of life. For example, if you get married in year 2 of your doctorate, you might expect to add another 6 months to the normal time it might take you. So my job gives me that opportunity to know people and to share experiences of people. So today I'll be presenting on setting the tone for your research and getting the basics right. It might seem more for people that are just starting their research, but in putting these slides together, what I realized is, some of these things we probably get to know it in the last year of our research, and we wish we knew it at the beginning. So it's never too late to find out, or to just share experiences among ourselves. So, like Desmond said, it's a safe space. Feel free to ask any questions, but I would prefer that I go through these slides. I think I should take just under an hour. There we can spend the rest of the time asking questions and just interacting among ourselves. I tell my students now in my teaching that there is no stupid question. Of course, you know that it might be funny, it's okay. We are all friends, we all laugh about it, but please, if there's something bothering you, I don't think there are any supervisors there. We are all colleagues, so there is no supervisor to listen to you. We can be very free, and you don't have to mention anybody's name. If you are going through something and you want general advice, I'm sure if I cannot answer, there is Desmond. I can see you, Professor Jenga is here also. They might chip in to give you their own thoughts. So my presentation is in 5 stages. I will start with some open thoughts, talk about how you can keep focused during the research. I will go through research questions, research problems, and I'll share a few tips on finishing faster. And ultimately, I would close up with some final thoughts and take questions at the end of everything. So my opening thoughts are in 3 folds. Why do you even bother studying a research degree? um, asking yourself, are you ready? The strategies for getting started. Because I think, in my experience, it's not as easy as people would think. It's not like when you start in an undergraduate degree and you go in, there's registration, there's first week of class. In a research degree, there's nearly no first week of class. There are no classmates, there is no syllabus. So how do you even know you have started in a way? If someone says you are okay, now you are doing your master's by research, what stage are you? Then you could actually say, I'm not even sure if I've started in a way. What I sometimes see is many people start research degrees, especially masters by research. I think, for lack of a better word, they start in error. So they start because they think it's easier than a 50-50 masters. By that, I mean not really knowing what it entails. So they are doing a master's by research. Maybe they were on the VITS application website and they didn't really understand what these codes meant and they just picked one. And now they realize they're into research, not really ready for research. I hope not very many people are like that in this class. Uh, Other ones that I see is people doing it half-heartedly, thinking like preparation. You can tell glaringly there is no preparation, there is no thoughts behind the application. In our school, sometimes when you borderline qualify on paper, we arrange interviews before admission. And sometimes what we've realized over the years is that some people are thinking, I might do it. I think it might be a good idea. I don't think that's very good. I think you should do it wholeheartedly, not half-heartedly. Um, they, there is a huge role for emotional intelligence, people management. I mean, I'm so sure you've listened to very many webinars and seminars that are spoken about supervisor management. So you don't see things like your supervisor is the one managing you. It's the other way around. You are the one managing your supervisor. And I mentioned this in my last presentation here, and I said, people supervise in one of two ways. So this is very important. You might think you are only here just to get supervised and finish and go, but I want you to know that it will impact you in more ways than you can immediately appreciate. You supervise either the way you were supervised. So you could have a great supervisor, and I hope my students will say, "Oh, Dr. Kola was great," or you supervise in a way that you weren't supervised. When I say, "Oh no, that prof was horrible. I don't want to be like him." I used to say when I just walk around, I would say, I don't know what I would look like when I'm 75, but I know what I would not look like when I'm 75. Okay, so sometimes we need to understand that emotional intelligence is very important. And um, I don't also like it when and this is from my own personal experience in my PhD years. I used to have a friend from Ghana, a very intelligent guy. He was an engineering student in the time. I think 2007, about that time. And I would ask him what his research was about. And in his own way of not wanting to bore me, he would just say, don't worry, it's too complicated, you will not understand. And I believed him at the time to say, well, perhaps he's trying his best to save me from these high level technical engineering words. But over the years, I've come to realize that no, that's wrong. You should take every opportunity to talk about your research. And if you think it's too complicated for someone that is also on a PhD to understand what you are talking about, perhaps you don't understand it. So let's start. For example, on a PhD, 3 years, 156 weeks, so many days, so many hours, is it worth it? And they say you don't write a thesis, that you craft one. So you have so many hours crafting this thing because at the end of the day, I usually say this, that the PhD is not so much of a product than a process. So many hours goes into you fine-tuning this product. So the process is equally as important as the product. The process and the products are equally important. You have a long time to do it. Oftentimes, it's time spent alone when you're not even sure what you are doing, and things like that. Why do you bother? Isn't it sometimes you ask yourself, why did you even start this thing? I think the earlier you ask that question, the better. If you're just 2 weeks into your research and you think you want to pull out, perhaps the only thing you would be losing is the money. But if you're in year 2 and you're asking yourself, why did I even start this thing? I never realized it would be this tough. And it happens to even the best of us. So I don't want you to beat yourself up too much or stuff like that. Let's look at some of the common reasons why people uh, do research degrees. In spite of the fact that it is financially draining, it's incredibly challenging on very many grounds. And I'm so sure very many of you would have been seeing this. One, people say they want to make a contribution towards their chosen field. So they'll say, I had a friend today on WhatsApp stories, I think. His status was how many citations his PhD thesis has now. And he was celebrating himself, and rightly so, saying, this thesis of mine, 10 years later, it's still generating interest. So that's like a motivation for some people to make a contribution towards the field where they find themselves. Some people it's for long-term career goals, again, and rightly so. Many people would think, okay, I'm into academia. I only have a master's, but I need a PhD to progress within this field. Some people would say I would consider academia maybe in retirement. So currently they are doing their research masters. Then in the next couple of years, they will come for a PhD because it's part of their long-term career goal. For some people, they just like to challenge knowledge, especially people who realize that knowledge is not static, isn't it? What we know today would be different from what we know tomorrow in the next couple of years. I remember when I was in junior school, there were 9 planets and it became 8, and I think it went back to 9. Maybe there are only 7 planets now. Recently, this week, another planet was just discovered, so many times the size of Jupiter, and it's still the technical word, or the way I understood the news, was that this planet has not even been born. It's been bettered too. So I'm thinking, how come we don't even know the number of planets, something like that? So people like improving knowledge, challenging the status quo, and trying to improve what it is that we know. That's a good motivation. Some other people just enjoy the subject matter. And I think those are like the best people. People that just say, I just like anything BIM, building information modeling, or I just like anything in social housing, housing provision for the homeless, how the states can help people own their homes. Topics like that interests me. And I'm like, wow, that's beautiful, because people like that, I think they have passion, and I'll talk more about passion later in the presentation. For some people, it might just be to demonstrate intellectual potential. They want to show their boyfriends or their girlfriends or their wives, their parents, that they actually have what it takes to excel academically. So they want to show that they have got like intellectual prowess, and they want to go into something like a PhD or a research master's, just to show that they're actually very smart. I used to say something, and which is that PhD in itself is quite peculiar, because in a tricky way, you can be too smart for a PhD. You could be too smart for research degrees generally, such that you find the process too slow for you. When students start and they're struggling with academic writing, and I mean, they just wonder, why do I keep struggling with this thing? Sometimes you might not be in the right state of mind. It needs training. But you ask yourself, I speak good English. I write fantastic letters in my office. I write emails very beautifully. I'm even a poet, or whatever that means. But that's so different. So you have to ask yourself, do I have what it takes to learn this craft called academia? Because if you're doing a research degree, you are in academia. I think that's the basic. foundation of actually getting into academia. So that takes me to the next point that I want to talk about, which is, are you ready? Asking yourself these three important questions. Are you ready for your research degrees? And I said the best way to know if you are ready is, one, do you have the time? Because the root word for, well, a similar word to being a student is to study. So you need to be studious, and to be studious, you need time to study. You cannot crash study in a way. If you have to read 40 literatures on a particular topic, you cannot read them in the same way that you read a novel. So do you have the time? And you think about it now to say, I'm not asking myself if I have time between now and June. I'm asking myself if I have time in the next 2 years. If you've been dating this lady for the past 4 years and she's giving you deadline to propose and get married, do you ask yourself, can I accommodate these and accommodate the marriage potential or accommodate the new baby prospects over the next 2 to 5 years, depending on what degree you are doing? Do I feel energized by the thought of reading, writing, and researching? Does it bore you? Are you the kind of person that opens a journal paper and falls asleep, even if you're just waking up? Because if that's your reality, you have to be sure that you are ready for these kinds of things. Because there's no two ways about it. If you're a research student, you need to study. Then another question you want to ask yourself is if you are interested in a new level of responsibility and leadership. For people in our school, construction economics, you would know that as a master's student or a PhD candidate, you have some responsibility like researching and, so not researching, supervising honors groups, maybe even masters by 50-50. Is it something that you would like to do? And it's part of your development process. So if you think of yourself as someone that doesn't really like teaching people, because they say it's a vocation, not a job, then you need to like understand you need to understand the gravity of the power given to you. You know, you as a supervisor would see many things and said it's just trivia. For the students on the other hand, they're panicking. Their life depends on it. So you might be struggling with your own thesis. Maybe you are at the end of your writing period, and some people are doing their honors and they're like panicking and they're restless. And in your mind, you're saying, oh, come on, it's only honors. No, it's a huge responsibility on your part. You should know that for those people, it's like life and death. So are you interested in carrying such responsibility? When someone would say, please, I have to present tomorrow or otherwise I'll be excluded, then you have to leave everything to make sure that they don't get excluded. So most research programs, they aim to prepare students for professional roles where these three activities take center stage, where you need time, where you need energy, where you need a new level of responsibility. Okay, so let's assume you've answered yes to all of those questions. Now you are getting started. What are some of the strategies required or that could help you in getting started and perhaps maybe keeping on? We've spoken about some of the questions you ask yourself to see if you're ready, but now that you're getting started, again, like I said, it's difficult to really say I have started because people register in February and they might do nothing until July. So you ask them, when did you start your PhD? And they'll say February. Oh, okay, over the last 4 months, what have you done? Nothing. Because really, you're only starting in July. You haven't really started. So, but now let's say you have started, you've agreed that you want to do a PhD. Yeah. I have a few pointers that I said, okay, just put this at the back of your mind and, just get it right at the beginning. One, have a candid conversation with the significant people in your life. For people in South Africa, and we are going back to normality now, isn't it? Where people have to, leave a country for another country to do a research. Imagine if you're coming from Nigeria, Ghana, or Zimbabwe to do a research degree in South Africa and you are leaving your family and other significant people in your life behind, let's say for a woman leaving her husband and kids behind, you need a candid conversation with them. Let them know what it is that you're going to do. You are not a regular student that will say, I'm in class and, or whatever. No, you are now like a learner and a teacher. Let them know that this research takes time. It's not something that can be done half-heartedly. It's not something like they call you and say, maybe on the FaceTime call, and they want to like chat with you. And it's, oh yeah, but mom, you're just on the bed. You're not doing anything. No, I'm reading. But you're not in class. Yes, I don't have to be in class. If I was in class, it would be easier. I am not in class. So it's good to have that conversation with them, let them know. Read as much as possible. It's difficult to actually give guidance to candidates on these points. How much is enough? How much is too much? How much is too little? When do you know you've gotten information overload? When do you know when to stop? How do you know when to stop? How do you know you found that which you are looking for? When your program begins, you will likely have a number of reading assignments. I mean, I do that to my students every now and again. I remember I used to say, maybe during my secondary school, as we call it in Nigeria, was about the first time that I would say I read a textbook from cover to cover over 3 years, maybe physics textbook. Eventually, by the end of 3 years, I would have covered every chapter. First degree days, I don't know if there's any textbook that I read every single thing. Novels, yes, I love reading novels and storybooks, as the case may be, but I can't remember reading any textbook. Even during my master's, I had some lecturers. Professor David Isaacs was in Greenwich University at the time. I had a couple of his books, but I would only read relevant chapters. Then I started a PhD, and I remember my supervisor pulled out some 2 project management books from a drawer and gave it to me and said, read these 2 books, summarize it, we see in 1 week. 2 textbooks. I'm thinking, how is that possible? Who reads textbooks? I never knew textbooks were meant to be read. So during the PhD was about the first time I read textbooks from cover to cover. It became an habit very shortly. And but I wish I knew this. I wish I knew. Well, perhaps if I'd known how tasking it would be, maybe I could have been discouraged a little bit. Mercifully, I didn't know that at that time. But then you should be ready to read as much as possible. Then thirdly, I would advise that you double check your commitment levels. For our research applicants in the school, one question we usually ask during the interview process is, yeah, what we paying for it? How ready are you? And what's your current commitment level? If you say you are the director of something in a government ministry, I will just tell you, do you think you can add this to a research degree? It is very important that you check your commitment levels. Yeah. So those are things that has to be at the back of your mind. But now that you started on day one, what do you do? We are going back to a form of normality. I think by next year, research would have to, well, I think we would be back on campus. Most likely, PhD students would be in for physical orientation. I don't know. I am hoping we can get some level of pre-COVID days. So when you start, what are the few things you want to do in the first couple of weeks or first couple of days, as the case may be, to just tell yourself that now you are pushing some admins away. When I became the PG research coordinator, I remember having a few meetings with the research students, and in certain timelines, I just wanted to know, guys, let's sit together. Let me know how to set timelines for new students. And some of the things that came out was shocking to me. I could relate to it, but it's shocking to say. And I say, Prof, a guy comes from Nigeria. He has never been outside of Nigeria before in his life. This is his first overseas trip. He finds himself in the middle of Joburg, different culture, different environment, different landscape. He comes on Friday. There's no way he's starting a PhD on Monday. So he gets to campus as small, well, or as as small or as big Wits campus is, from where the buses drop him off, it might take him a week to even know matrix. And I don't know, for those of you that have been to campus, you know these things, and it sounds easy for you now, But then for a new person, they might even be missing their way to their own office. So there are some things that you need to get out of the way, because if those things are not out of the way, your research cannot start. Number one, I said make your workspace your own. So you might need to like go to rec the first couple of days with like boxes. If there is a family picture you want to put on your desk, if there's a pot plant you want to put there, make your place comfortable. Get a good chair, back support if you need it. You have a space allocated to you for a PhD, maybe for the next 3 years. Make that space your own, because that's somewhere where you'll be spending so much time. Get all the forms sorted. There is nothing as irritating as being in the third, fourth month of your PhD, realizing that you haven't signed an MOU that was due in week one. Sometimes it gets like that. You want to submit your proposal, then you realize that there's one little 120 rand that you did not pay on time. So get all these forms sorted as quickly as possible. Make sure your access cards work. It can be very irritating. It's a very little thing. And I remember that in my school and the PhD room, there was a time that my access card wasn't working. I need to call Claudia, one of our PG officers, to open for me each time. You can imagine something as little as that. So spend a day to get those kinds of things out of the way. And those are like many things that you're doing at the beginning that actually just helps you right from the word go. Get to know the admin staff. I put this on purpose, and I don't take it lightly at all. Admin staffs are very, very important to you. During my own PhD, I think it was my supervisor that mentioned that to me, to say in the course of the PhD, two people would be important to you. I only had one supervisor, your supervisor, and the admin ladies. It was three of them. Carol Gordon was one of them. And I still remember until tomorrow. I mean, I cannot overemphasize the importance of knowing these people. Be kind to them, be nice to them. Your supervisor, yes, is like the main person, but there is something about the concept of power and authority. Admin people do not have any authority, but they have power. So you just submit your thesis and they don't send it for external examination because you did not bind it with the right binder, something like that. And nothing would happen. They just won't send it. So they don't have the authority to pass or fail you, but they have the power to delay you. And they also have the goodwill that sometimes they'll let you know something, when let them know you in a way, and just be nice to them. I cannot stress that enough. Then lastly, I say, sorry, another point is start reading papers. Start reading as far as you can. Hit the ground running. While you're walking up and down, while you're trying to sort your space, start reading paper. At any time, have 2-3 papers, in your backpack that you can read on motion while waiting at the desk, while waiting at the reception, something to read. Meet your supervisor or supervisors in person. So even though you've done video calls with them, you've done countless calls and exchanged emails with them, meet them in person. So now that you have started, have a sit down, get to know the kind of people they are. Don't forget, I mentioned in my opening thoughts that you need to have emotional intelligence. Sit with your supervisor, feel their body language, know the kind of person that they are. If you have two supervisors, devise a way to work between those two people, because there might be two different people. There is this, a professor friend of mine from Nigeria used to say something like, in the University of Lagos, you see two professors, they don't talk to each other, but they co-author articles together. So because in academia, you don't have to be my friend. I could actually work with you on a paper and I don't like you. And we can actually co-supervise the students, even though we don't talk to each other. Imagine yourself being in the middle of those two kinds of people. How do you cope? Or you have a supervisor that doesn't want you talking to any other person in the school because they are isolating themselves. So when you meet that kind of a person, you know that No man is an island. Your own temperament is such that you talk to people. So if you talk to your supervisor and you know they don't want you to talk to anyone, yes, you might still find yourself going to Professor Kola and say, please, I need help with this aspect of my work. I give you my advice. But your emotional intelligence tells you that you don't go to your supervisor and say, oh, Professor Kola said something. You should just be responsible and reasonable enough to know that you don't do that. Yeah, so meet your supervisors and get to know others in your research group. Don't forget that there is no classmates or there are no classmates, there is no syllabus, there is nothing like that in a research degree, but you need to know what other people are studying. Um, 2 days or 3 days ago, I think I was in my PhD, in my student's PhD room. I call it my own PhD room also. And I asked the guys I met there, I said, guys, do you know anybody working on waste management? Instantly, both of them said, oh, talk to this lady. And I felt like that's the way it should be. You should know people in your research group. People in your research group should know you also because it works both ways. I might be reading something in real estate and I'm writing something on housing problems in Johannesburg. And I come across something that I say, oh, this would actually benefit this other guy. This is his own research group. So you cannot do it alone. You need support behind you. Get to know others in your research group, but then get them to know you also. So the next point that I would move to is how to stay focused during the PhD. You have never written a thesis before, or like said quoted in the beginning, you've never crafted one in the past. If you have, you'll have been a doctor already. You've never written a research master's before. If you have, you will have had a master's already. Chances are, for 90% of the people, I believe we are all doing our first PhDs or our first masters by research. So you should know that you don't know how to do this thing because if you do, then you'll have been a doctor. So, and there's a good chance that what you are currently studying is the biggest or the longest academic qualification you are going to complete till date. So, don't stress yourself too much, knowing fully well that you don't know how to do it. So, when it's like when you're arguing and you're arguing as if you're absolutely correct, no, you might not be. So, you should give space for losing focus. It's understandable. We're just all humans. Yeah. So it's going to be demanding. Your thoughts would evolve. You might lose focus, but this is about staying focused. It's particularly difficult because you're an independent researcher. You're on your own. A PhD or master's by research is not like honors where you do three in a group and one person could be writing on the other two people. In a PhD, you're an independent researcher. That's the biggest incentives for very many, but that's also the biggest challenge also because no one is telling you what to do. So going for long periods of time without anyone telling you what to do, when to do it, and why you are doing it can be challenging. So you keep working and your supervisor says, okay, I'm still busy at the moment, just keep on doing it. And you're not even sure if you're in the right direction. Isn't it they say direction is more important than speed? Because you can actually be going fast in the wrong way. So how do you refocus each time? It is strange that I should reference Mike Tyson when he says everyone has a plan until they are punched in the mouth. So this was in reference to him preparing for a fight with Evander Holyfield. And I think he won the fight and it was so asked, so how did you plan for this? And I said, no, I'm a boxer, but I'm fighting like an heavyweight boxer also. It's good to have a plan, but no plan survives contact with the enemy. Oh, well, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So number one, I would say talk to someone. Don't feel isolated. Don't think your plan is foolproof. You have discovered you're in charge of what's going to happen. No, talk to someone. It's easy. Your research starts with good intentions, but the best of students get distracted. No matter how good you think you are, the big picture would change and you wouldn't even notice because it didn't change overnight. gradually. And in my own PhD, for example, I remember that my first proposal for admission was on private-public partnerships. And I finished with aftermarket regeneration, two different things. One was purely quantitative, the other one was mixed methods. It did not, well, it changed at a period, but it was gradually before I knew it, okay, this is a new thing I want to do now. Yeah. So talking to someone is very important. Just someone, probably even in your research group, that will now say, okay, so now are you now looking at these things? But isn't it the last time we spoke, it was about something else? Then that could actually help you refocus. Number two, set yourself arbitrary deadlines and stick to them. Don't forget again that the MOUs are there, like I said in just in the slide before now, that not many plans, let me not say no plans, but I'll say not many plans survive contact with the enemy. Everybody has a plan until they are punched in the face. So now you had an MOU with your supervisor in week 1 of your PhD or your research masters. This is week 60. You had even forgotten that there was an MOU. And the MOU probably had deadlines, you'd forgotten about that. Now we are just trying to survive the next exam or the next month. So it's very important that you set yourself some arbitrary deadlines. Don't forget that these deadlines are your deadlines, not your supervisor's deadline. So my master's students, 50-50, I meet them once every 2 weeks. And if it's a meeting day today, I tell them, remind me one day before the meeting. So we usually meet on Wednesday. So they remind me on a Tuesday, Prof, meeting tomorrow. Yes, RSVP one day before. If you don't come, heavens will not fall. It is your own deadline. You are the one meeting it. I'm not the one to run after you. I've made myself available every 2 weeks to discuss your research with you. If we don't take that, that's yours. And for you as a student, it is very important to make things urgent because it will need working and reworking. So there is no deadline per se apart from when you want to graduate and you're trying to just finish on time. But you have to make these arbitrary deadlines and make it urgent. Otherwise, nothing would get done. Brian Eno said, everything is an experiment until it has a deadline that gives it a destination, context, and a reason. Rita Brown said, a deadline is a negative inspiration, but still, it's better than no inspiration at all. So you might want to say, oh, take it easy. There is no hurry in life. And deadlines are seen as negative inspirations, but that's better than no inspirations at all. So aside setting arbitrary deadlines and trying to stick to them, I would also say write out your key objectives somewhere where you will see them. During my PhD, I had research questions and it was changing the wording, the actual phrasing was changing every time. And one of the things that I would do is I would try to memorize these objectives so that at any time I can recite them word for word. It's only about 5 of them. So, and it's a different context by the way. So at the time I didn't have a car from university home, I need time for this thing to be in my head. And I thought I was losing my mind at the time. So I would either get off the bus 2 stops before my destination. I mean, if you live in England, you know, no 2 stops are more than 500 yards away apart from each other. So I would get down about 1 mile away from the house, just so that I have a good 10 minutes to think as I'm going up. So the objectives are what I'll be reciting to myself. Sometimes if I forget, I would get off beyond my bus stop so I can walk back. This might seem trivial, but it focuses you. When you're reading something that is not meaningful, you can easily tell. Because sometimes a work is well written, it convinces you to move towards them. But if your objectives are clear, it's written, you can see them, you can even hear them in your head, then when you're reading something that is not you, you can say, well, that's a great piece of work, but it is not me. Another thing is putting time aside to work towards your goal or the goals that you really care about. Joan Croft said, without a goal, you cannot score. So you need time. Um, as they say, work would always expand to take up the space and time available to them. So if you are someone that procrastinates, if you're someone that is doing your research part-time, you should know that you should set aside time for PhD because your current work would always expand to take time available to it. So make sure there is no space for those other works. Create space for the PhD. It could be routine, it could be systematic to say every day when I wake up, the first hour is on my research. Then my break time is on my research. Or it could be every day between 8 and 9 is on my research, or as the case may be. So if you know yourself as someone that procrastinates a lot, you need to set time aside for your work and try to stick also to that. Other little points are you should just know, like, develop a topic that would hold your interest because there's nothing as uh, discouraging as doing something that you don't like. And that's why sometimes I envy these um, footballers, people that would say they can actually play football for free, but they get paid for even playing. So I mean, it's their job, they're professionals. So same with you, if you get a topic that you know you can read this, you can read around this topic for free. This is something that you would do when you're tired. So when you're tired, you just find yourself coding. That's something that relaxes you. If your PhD is based on coding, then you're fine. Also, only ask questions that can be answered. So when you're trying to come up with a research problem, with a research question, have it at the back of your mind to say, I want to take full advantage of the answer that I might get. So are there any biases that might prevent the answer I would get from being reasonable? Read all that you can on the subject. I know that's a little bit too much of a vague statement, but then try to read as much as you can. Then, very, 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 very importantly, find a theoretical base to support your topic. This I say very, very cautiously. Because again, you will see in the course of the presentation that, well, how do I reconcile these two things? If your work is floating, i.e., no theoretical underpinning, you would run into problems because you don't know when you have found what you're looking for. So it might be a good idea for you to say, well, my work is sitting within this theory. But that is different from something that I called capabilities-based research. I will talk about that later, but then it's good to find a theoretical basis to say, my work is based on the theories of consumer, eligibility formation or whatever it is. Then my research questions are under this theoretical base. Look for a niche for yourself to make a difference. So you've read so wide and far, I can see that many people have done this thing, but there's always something small that you can add to the arguments. Allow yourself to shift gears. Even though I said try to write your objectives down, stick to them, but then if you start seeing yourself to deviate, just be conscious of it. Okay, now I want to move to this. Not finding yourself subconsciously finding yourself in another topic. If you're shifting gear, do it purposefully. Fine-tune your topic based on inputs from others. The more you talk to people, the better. We do this in our school, I think, the research meetings. When you talk to other students and they put some inputs, yeah, you're fine-tuning. You're not deviating, you're just fine-tuning. Some people might call it scoping, but then it might be very important, important. Some lecturers will say, when you presented in my school, I mean, those that have done that in the past will know that I often say, note the difference between a question and a comment. So one of the reviewers could say, I suggest this to you, note it. It doesn't really need a response. It's just something like, okay, I will think about it, but then fine tune, it can help you to fine tune your topic. Think about your work as part of an international dialogue, make it relevant to people outside of your immediate circle and keep on touch of your studentship. it's very, very sad that you have this massive task ahead of you, which is to complete your research degree. And at the time you want to submit, they tell you that you didn't register in January. And the reason was because you are too busy working on your research. That is not good. So moving on to questioning the questions. Yeah. So we're still at the beginning, still trying to get the basics right. We know that research is more fluid at the beginning. That's when you have the most room to wriggle and reverse some things. You can even change your topic entirely if your supervisor is happy with them. But the more you get into the research, the more it becomes linear and irreversible. I mean, nobody changes topic after data collection, for example. So you know that this compels us now to spend more time at the beginning of the research. So I deal with my students and I say, now we've passed the last proposal stage. We want to go for data collection. Let's not hurry. Let's spend all the time now before we go collect this data, because the problem would be collecting data and realizing that you have no use for it. So it is important, but then we see that little time is spent at this front end of the research. Very many people are very hasty to, get into research and let's just start doing it. Doing what? Because people confuse research methods for methodology. You see, so people just say, I've taken this course on research methods. I'm very good with quantitative analysis. And so I think I can actually start doing these things now, without really realizing that in methodology, you are thinking about finding the right research questions. It's about thinking about thinking. So it might look like you're not doing anything, but then I want you to know that methodology is more than technique. So you don't start a PhD because you find yourself very good with Excel. I mean, that's very shallow. Instead, it's a conscious exploration of meaningful research questions. Because in my days, the joke used to be when you start your PhD in the first 3 to 6 months, what we say among ourselves is that I'm still looking for a problem because I don't have a problem. So you find yourself in England looking for a problem, just jokingly. So you are thinking about what you are thinking about. You're consciously exploring your research question, because a research problem is different from a research question. And not all problems are researchable. For example, I have an example, I think, in this slide. There is no hospital in this small city in Mpumalanga. That's not a research problem. There is no hospital. ANC, build hospital. End of story. But there are more ways of researching that kind of a problem. Why is there no hospital? Is there a need for an hospital? What happened to the previous hospitals? Where are people currently getting treatments now? How would an hospital improve people's lives? Those are things that you can actually add around and say, what would an hospital do? Because if there is no hospital, it's a very straightforward thing, just build an hospital. So I said nothing is more basic in the research process than the question itself that we choose to study. So spending more time on this question is very important. Designing and executing very many types of researches, is very important. But it can be very difficult. It can be very messy. It can be very discouraging, you see. But it is only going to be so if there is no well-formulated research question on which to build the research itself. You might have a topic or you might have an idea, but if you don't have consolidated research questions, that would be a problem. That would get you into some difficulties. An idea on my own research, like I said earlier, people start things a little bit too hastily. They just want to start without thinking about the actual concepts. What are the potential hypotheses, the units of analysis, access to data, and things like that. This leads to confusion, loss of interest and things like that. And because it gets worse when you haven't given it so much time, because students, rarely feel comfortable changing their research topics. Sometimes you find yourself, I've already spent 9 months on this and I must make it work. So if you know, and that is true, most times you don't want to change a research topic in year 2. So it pays you better to spend 3 good months in the beginning of thinking about what you want to do and giving it some deep theoretical thoughts. 2 approaches to research. I called one, the question and passion-led approach to research. And I'll talk more about this. To say, when you're thinking about your research, what drives the questions? Is it that this question is important to me and that is why I'm doing this research? Or that well, this thing is something I'm passionate about? So when I have a new student, I like to discover, capture, maintain their passion, and say, what's your background like? What's something that interests you? What's something that intrigues you? What's something that you want to know more about? So find topics that are meaningful and something that can potentially improve lives. Because in research, there is a so what question. There are no public parks in Mpumalanga, so what? That's when you understand that you don't understand. Or that's when you realize that you don't understand. So I'll talk more about this question on passion-led research as we go along also. So let's talk about some research-able problems. How do you find out that you are asking the right question? There's data or methods-led approach to research, and there is a question and passion-led approach to research. I find that in the Wits Business School, PhDs are usually very quick. Why? Because they are usually quantitative. So once you can just analyze data and that's it. So for such people, their approach to research may be data or methods led. If you are very good with data, you might be able to do some quantitative analysis very quickly and pass. But you might be good with data, but disinterested in numbers. You still don't get it. So what does it mean that we are looking at the edging of gold prices and cattle? It makes no sense to you. So what I usually advocate for is question and passion-led approach to research. To say, this is a research question. I mean, you don't do a PhD just because you think you're good with NVivo as a technique of data analysis, and that's why you chose the topic. That's working backwards. No, you should learn NVivo because this question is important to you. You are passionate about people sleeping under the bridges in Santon. And so you want to look for ways of ending homelessness in affluent neighborhoods. How can this be done? What can I do to help? The question and the passion is leading your research. Because 3 years, 5 years, 2 years of your lifetime of your life is not, it's not minimal. You need to do something that you're passionate about, not something that you think you have the research tools to do, or things that you think, okay, there is data available on house prices, and so I will do a research on this. When you get into the slightest discouragement, you will realize that you lose focus. A research problem, why is it important? I know very many of you, even if you're at the beginning of your research, you would have been talking about research problems by now. It's a statement about an area of concern. But I particularly want to call your attention to what it is not. So I said, a research problem does not state how to do something. That's not the problem. How to do it might come out from your recommendations, might be one of the things you come out with in the research, but the problem is something that is of concern, a condition to be improved. You contextualize it by saying what we are losing by this problem existing, but it is not something that we don't know. So your research plan can be that we don't know how a new hospital would improve the lives of people in Mpumalanga. No, that's not a problem. We don't know. You don't know. Dr. Peterson knows. So your research problem is not what you don't know, it is what you know. And why is it important? It introduces the reader to the importance of the topic being studied. It might be semantics. You might know how to write better than the next researcher, but you need to be able to demonstrate to a reader that, what I am studying is very important. Before you can do that, it should be important to you. My supervisor would say something, Kola, read that statement, I read it. What does it mean? And I'm struggling. And she will say, if it makes no sense to you, it will make no sense to anybody. So if you want to introduce the reader to the importance, it has to be important to you. So that's where passion-led research comes into place. You don't pass or fail your research based on passion, definitely, but it sustains you. Another importance of research problem statements is that it places the problem into a particular context, like I said earlier, and it provides the framework for reporting the results. To say, we know the kind of statements we want to make, we just don't know what the statement would be. We want to be able to say, a new hospital would would do this, but we don't know that yet. We know the problem, we don't know what we would find. So we have a framework for reporting the result. And the framework will be very important because at the end of the day, you have to be able to demonstrate that what you are looking for or what the problem is has been resolved. You have, if going back to the example of the hospital, you wouldn't build an hospital at the end of your research, but you have a framework that shows the importance of an hospital now at the end of your research. At the end of your research, there's still no hospital. So the physical problem, the actual problem has not been solved, but the research problem has been solved. Research problem, so what? You have to think about the so what. Okay, there is no hospital in this area, so what? So what is about the relevancy test? Yeah, the quality of a measurement procedure that provides repeatability and accuracy. So is it relevant? Is it important? Is it of what use is it? Note that answering the so what question requires a commitment on your part to not only show what you have researched, the material, but that you have thought about its significance. So that's where there is a section in your chapter 1 usually called justification of research or something like that. To say, I've given it some thought, I see why it's a problem and why it is important. I have a few pointers on what the problem must feature. It should be clear and concise. It should relate to one or more fields of study. Let there be an area, because you wouldn't have a PhD in mechanical engineering, but your research problem is not in mechanical at all, or nothing related to mechanical engineering. It should be feasible. Like I said at the beginning, ask questions that can be answered. A good problem is grounded in theory. You need to have a theory backing it. You can actually create theory, but you only have 3 to 5 years. Even if you're part for your PhD, for example, you don't have time to generate a theory. And they must have a base in literature. Even if there is a new field and it will say something like there is a dearth of literature in this regard, you must have people that have interests in at least the peripheries of your research problem. You need to ask yourself, is it researchable? It might be interesting, it might be relevant, it might be you might be very passionate about it, but is it researchable? On very many grounds. Either is it too complex? Do you have the means to do this? All of those things are what goes into the researchability context. You want to do a research in South Africa now, it will require you intervene Julius Malema, Musi Maimane, and President Cyril Ramaphosa. I would say that's not researchable. Because where would you get those 3 people? Or how long would it take you if you don't have the resources to do that? And I also say, note that your research problem and your research topic are 2 different things. Some mistakes to avoid, some things that are not really a research problem. I've said one of those things. One of the ones that are very common is saying we don't know the impact of crime on house prices. It is only you that does not know. So there's something called secular reasoning. Yeah. So like saying that the research problem is simply is absence of things you are suggesting. To say, it would be good to have this. That's just secular reasoning. And I gave the example of this particular hospital to say, you're not talking about the significance, you're not talking about the relevance. And so why do you think this is a research problem? All of this, I am not teaching you how to write a research problem. I'm only telling you to question the question. Yeah. And spend time at the beginning thinking about your question and about your problem. Because you don't want to be in year two before you realize that your research problem was so badly written. For lack of a better word, it would drain you. If you are doing, I mean, imagine if you are submitting your final thesis and the examiners are saying you don't have achievable research questions. You can imagine how draining that would be. I tell my students that, well, we can take any kind of feedback from external examiners, but if it comes to something that says your methodology is flawed, oof, that's painful. So imagine if you get to the end of your research and your research questions are subjective. So that's why it is good to get it right at the beginning. It's part of getting the basics right. And the last part of this research, I'll spend like 2 minutes on it, is how to complete your research thesis faster. So either you complete it fast or you complete it faster. It will take different paces. It's more like a marathon than a sprint. I used to say when I do 21Ks, the second 7Ks is always the best. The first 1K might be very slow. The last 1K might be very slow. That could be a good 4 to 5Ks, then another very good 7 to 8Ks. But then different spaces. One thing I would say, if you're planning to complete in a good time, number one, understand the requirements. I find it sometimes when students are telling me that they are ready for their proposal presentation, but by the way, I should send them the templates. So now we're thinking, so what were you doing? What were you using to write this proposal that is ready? You don't even know the requirements for a proposal, and you are ready for the proposal. It would be good to know that when you want to start writing your thesis, you know what it is that should be in a thesis. Little things like missing the guidelines, formatting requirements, those things are little things that are, irritating. As an examiner, I see this work sent to me in in red, and it's all written in red. So I can see the underlines, the typographical errors. It distracts me from the content of the work. I'm not seeing plenty typographical mistakes. Students not formatting their work very well. Some are justified, some are not justified. Sometimes the fonts are not all black. Sometimes it's gray, but maybe they don't wear glasses. They cannot see. Things like that. So it is very important to understand the requirements before you start. Number two, I say create a timeline. And say at this point, I want to have been able to have met these things. Plan this thesis well in advance. Know what you have to have done at which points. And don't forget that these things are not always in your hands. So you factor in the time for the parts of it that are not in your own hands. For example, you know that if you submit your internal reports to me, you're only getting 2 internal reviewers. Normally, as a PG research coordinator, I give these internal reviewers 3 weeks to get back to me. For those of you that have been in the school for longer, you can tell that oftentimes the reviewers take longer than 3 weeks. If I were you as a student wanting to start data collection, let's say by December this year, I would submit my exams, giving myself an extra 3 weeks, knowing fully well that in case we cannot get a date for you or in case you miss a month or things like that. So when you're creating a timeline, attend to the things that are within your own control very, very quickly. and give time for the things that are without your control, that are outside your control. Things that could go wrong, whatever it is that could go wrong. When you're going for data collection and interviews, you have to do interviews. You don't say you will do interviews in 2 weeks because you're not the one that will be interviewed. You want to interview this person and they tell you to come back in 2 weeks' time. What do? So you have to create timelines and make it reasonable. Other things is like keeping it clear, keep your work clear. Specific details from the sample, variables, methods, let it be. I used to tell people that when you write a research problem, let it be clear. For example, I have a statement that says the statement of research problem is da 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 da. In that way, it is clear to everybody. Avoid perfectionism. So don't keep working and working. There is no perfect thesis. There is no perfect proposal. Let's just see what you have written, but make it as reasonable as possible. Find supports. I mean, I am so glad that I only knew about the AD about 2 years ago, but in my interactions with them, I can see it's immense support. And I haven't spoken with Dr. Clennon about this, but I'm so sure that to a large extent, the support is there. The problem might be students don't come for it. So as a research student, knowing fully well that you don't have lecturers, you don't have teachers, you need academic development units as support. So my final thought is on you not getting, it's okay to get stuck. It is bad to stay stuck. So every now and again, you might be discouraged. You have your friends and your co-colleague and your other research students to help you out of it, but then don't feel overwhelmed by just sheer pressure. You should know that your research journey is your own journey, and oftentimes there is support available to you. Very many things will come to you in its own time. And I'll share an experience with you during my own PhD. There was a guy in my office. We shared the same, just two of us in an office. And I was struggling with my methodology in a way that I think I, just crossed over it and moved on. But I know in my mind that I don't have this thing, well articulated in my head. I know I cannot, it's not there. I could tell. I was just struggling with it. And my office guy at the time, he was Chinese, I think. So he didn't speak good English. I mean, he communicates, but then English wasn't his first language. And it was tricky. So he couldn't really help me because my problem was trying to get in a straight line. And there was no golden thread across my methodology. And my supervisor didn't even have a methodology chapter in our own PhD. Our PhD was 1970 something, so there was no methodology at those days. So she couldn't really help me. But my colleague went for an exam. I don't think it was his Viva. It was just one exam before Viva. And he was presenting to me in preparation for this exam. And as he was presenting to me, my own methodology just clicked like that. So I thought to myself, if I had been spending more time with this guy presenting our works to each other, maybe he could have come earlier. I'm not sure. But what I'm saying is that you cannot overestimate the importance of seeking support from your research group. But I want you to also know that seminars and webinars like this are very important. The ADU is a repository of so much information and assistance. If they cannot help you, I am so sure they know who can help you. And on that note, I would say thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time. And now I would spend some time taking questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. I mean, you've done justice to what we asked you to do, and now we open the floor for questions. I mean, getting these basics right, very, very important. Remember that the orientation, I had said to you guys that the reason why we are taking a different approach with regards to doing these webinars is to ensure that those of you who start the PhD or masters and forget to graduate, we help you, we remind you that you need to graduate. So can we have some questions? And I think that whilst the questions are coming, I see my boss is here. Prof. Genga, do you want to say some few words?
You know, Desmond, I can also come and just watch and listen as well. No, thank you very much, Dr. Clenham and Prof. Really, really insightful. Thank you so much for taking the rigor. I see it was not just something you decided to do off the cuff, but you put a lot of thought and you've applied yourself wholly. So I can only say thank you, and I'm glad it has been recorded and now it's immortalized for more to able to learn and enjoy from this, not just now but beyond. So thank you, Prof. I truly appreciate that. If there's any comments I can add now that Desmond has put me on the spot, maybe two or three quick words from your presentation. I think the first thing is for those that are just commencing their journey as a supervisor and as somebody who's been a student before. One thing that was emphasized when I started my journey, Desmond, Prof, calling me Prof now, I'll be a Prof soon, Dr. Desmond, we were supervised by the same person. The first 6 months was spent in rigor of study. That cannot be underplayed for those that are commencing their research journey. Please take the opportunity to just spend that time reading the literature, the detail, and the background within which your discipline entails. As somebody who supervises, it is always very clear, not just in the proposal presentation, but also in the detail of the work for someone who's not got the underpinning. I cannot underestimate or undervalue the detail that one goes through. And the reason I'll say that is the topic that I picked for my postdoc was because of the research I was doing in preparation for my PhD. And I realized, okay, I'm already on this path, I cannot get out of it, but I can see where the research is going. And should I complete this, there's an opportunity for me to pursue something else. So please be the person when you meet with your supervisor, is telling them the new technology in this space, not your supervisor telling you what are the advancements. They should be always shocked to hear, oh, okay, so this is where it's going. And they tell you, no, let's focus on this now. When you're done, let's make a plan for this later. That's just one comment. Second comment that I really want to ground on what our Prof finished with, the power of working together. I cannot underpin that as well, or underestimate how much that is important for your journey. As colleagues right now, this journey for you to succeed, it's a communal effort, and working with your peers, not necessarily studying together, but engaging on ideas. Similar things like the postgraduate symposium, aspects within your school, your discipline, talks, webinars like this, but also just engaging with your peers. I can tell you it's a whole, I can echo so many examples from what Prof mentioned. In helping somebody else, I found solutions for my own work. And sometimes somebody else saw some of my challenges because they thought a little bit differently, help solve the problem. So please work together. Find peers who you can work with. It makes the journey is going to be challenging, but it makes it a little bit exciting because you don't do it by yourself. So I really wish you all the best. I'll hold my comments there, and I just want to again say thank you so much, Prof. Thoroughly enjoyable and very insightful presentation.
Thank
Over
you
to you,
so
Dr.
much. Thank you so much, Prof. I also have Dr. Michael Bodorin on the call, and I would also want him to share one or two nuggets with us. The reason why we bring in some of them is that when they were students, they had some things, and then they would also, it's also good that they shared that with you. So, Dr. Bodorin, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tenam. Okay, let me show my video quickly, then I'll take it on again. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Clenham. Thanks for putting me on the spot. I don't know what to even say after the likes of Prof. Kola Ijasan and Prof. Genga have spoken. But then, because I was also there as a student, I think I would have something that is quite different from what we've been discussing since morning. In as much as you work with people, you collaborate, and you study very hard, those are very, very important points. Try as much as possible to also take a rest because you don't want to burn out. Work-life balance is very, very important. I almost got burnt out, so that's why I'm giving that advice. But while you're doing that, you have to do it strategically because there are two things you can do to time. You either spend it or invest it. So when I decided to do a postdoc, I made sure that I often take time to rest. But while I'm resting, or hanging out with my friends, I make sure that I still discuss research, maybe about their research. Then that way, I'm not spending time, I'm investing because I'm getting to learn from others about their research and how they are solving certain problems. So, having said that, I think I would like to stop there. Thanks again, Dr. Klenam, Prof. Ijasan, and Prof. Kenga.
Thanks a lot. Now I think I see two hands lifted. Motsui and Mukhludi, please, in that order. Please go for it. Sorry if I butchered your name. I sincerely apologize.
Hi,
Thank
Jess.
you, sir, for the opportunity. This is Motsei here. I am an honors student in quantity surveying. I have few questions because this is still new to me. So just bear with me. I'm gonna ask probably lame questions, but just bear with me. I have three questions actually. The first one, I remember last year when we were still studying with research, we were told that you find questions that are referred to as empirical questions. And because we didn't have an idea of what are those exactly and how do we approach that, the lecturer came to us with a response to say that we gave her empirical questions, but actually there were a lot. So in actual fact, she was saying that empirical questions have to be limited to a certain number, and we were confused. We didn't understand what are the empirical questions exactly. So I would like clarity on that, the empirical questions. And then another one, it's about the methodology. Sir mentioned the qualitative, quantitative, and the mixed one. So I would like to get clarity on the mixed one. What does it involve? What is it all about? And how do you decide that you are going to use the mixed one? And then the last question is the supervisor. Is it a must that when you get a supervisor, your research topic must be relevant to what he or she is doing? It can be, you can be in the same industry, let's say construction or engineering, but then should your topic be based on what he is also busy with, or it can be something different, he'll still be able to assist. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So I think let's do it one by one. So let's answer Motsei's question, then we come to Maklodi's question. So I'll be back with you. So you've asked three questions. One is about empirical questions, the other about methodology, and the last about supervisors. And I think they're not lame questions. They are very important questions to actually ask at the beginning of your research. And I feel you. I can empathize with you because when you're doing honors research, you only have 6 months to submit, so it has to be done. And at that level, I really don't consider it supervision. It's like a model. I don't know what it's called. I think, well, in my school, and which is your school, I think it's 4031 or something like that. It's a model. It's not really research technically. And the person in charge might want to come up with, loosely using the word empirical, it just means something measurable. It will be positivist to a large extent, and it's trying to keep it straight and easy in your mind to say, how do you know that you've done what you want to do? So if you want to look at the impact of skills shortage on the construction industry in Gauteng, for example, you can just go with the population of fresh graduates, how quickly do they get absorbed, how many people are needed. You can quantify it. So at the end of the day, you want to see how higher education is supporting skills development, and you can just put it in empirical mode. So they're asking you to bring up empirical questions. I believe at that time it's meant to be something whose answers are measurable, and it's easier, and I use the word easy with caution, it's easier for you to say, oh, this is the answer to this kind of question. As you go higher in your research journey, it becomes more difficult. Answers to research questions become less empirical. It's not, well, it should still be empirical, but it's not as obvious, because if it's just obvious, then that's not higher level research. So it's the whole idea, I believe, behind making it empirical is to make it easy for you to know you found the answer. Because in research, you might If you don't have clear-cut, well-scoped answers, you might not know you found that which you are looking for. You keep looking even when you found it. Another thing about methodology being, three broad categorizations, quantitative, qualitative, mixed method. If it's on a continuum, yes, there are some topics that you want to study, and you know that having surveys alone wouldn't cut it. Because in surveys, 10 people said yes, 15 people said no, and so what? It doesn't mean that the 15 that said no carries the day. It is not, research is not democratic. In fact, 10 people can say yes, one person says no, and that one person that said no is the actual reliable response. The other 9 are not reliable. So to give your research rigor, sometimes it is good to do mixed method, which is quantitative and qualitative methodological undertones, rubbing together. In that, usually when you do that, they call it triangulation. But there are very many ways of triangulating. So when you say you are doing quantitative and qualitative, it still depends on the type of quantitative. Was your quantitative surveys or just completely secondary data, which might be readily available to you, but you might want some interviews to further probe your findings. So let's say, without being downgrading anybody, but let's say an honors level student will do this and just analyze the quantitative secondary data and say, this is what data says. For a research master's or a PhD student will say, well, this is what the research says. Why is the research saying this? And how can this be improved? For those why and how, you might need a focus group of experts. You might need interview with key stakeholders, and that's how the quant and qual mixes. It depends on the level that you want to take your rigor to. It's usually, for some kinds of research, there might be no interviews at all. Like I said, if it's purely quantitative, trying to look at what's going on the JSC, you might just do pure quant. But mixed method is about that, giving your research a balance and giving it rigor. And lastly, you talked about supervisors, and that's very interesting again. Again, it depends on the level of education. When you are doing your honors or your third year reports, I don't even want to call it research, I could be in real estate and supervise you in engineering, because what I would just be doing is monitoring the process. I don't need to know anything about it. I don't even have to be interested about it. I will just tell you, go and read 10 articles, come back to me. No, but if you're doing a PhD, you want someone in that field, because one, they'll be able to help you with materials. They'll be able to help you with guidance. They might be able to help you with who to follow academically, to say, well, on ResearchGate, follow these 3, 4, 5 guys. They will be able to tell you about the current trends, although like Prof. Jenga is saying, you should be the one to come up with this. But then it's their field. And when you talk about these things you are bringing to them, they can relate to it. So you're in quantity surveying, you wouldn't want to go for a supervisor to supervise a PhD with someone from humanities. You would be having conflict of interest. They wouldn't have the same. You should have most passion in the work, but then if you get someone that doesn't have interest academically, no passion, no connection, that wouldn't fly. Definitely for external examination, your examiners must be people within your field. And I think it's good to get someone as much in your field as possible. Don't forget that if you're doing a PhD, for example, by the time you graduate, you will know more than your supervisor. So they shouldn't really be an expert in that particular topic, but they should be an expert in the broad area. So if it's QS, you're looking for people in affiliated or sister industry, sister field, not someone completely off tangent. And that's why this should be important to you. Your supervisor's research area should be relevant to yours so that you can actually work together. I hope that answers the question.
Prof, let me quickly chip in this and say that, guys, those in the built environment, I have been thinking about you, and that's why I just put in the chat. Professor Tony, we call him the father of mixed method research from University of Cambridge, has agreed that we were going to have a session specifically for all these things. So for honors, masters, and I'm also going to engage with Prof. Kola so that we have a workshop for research methods, especially for the built environment. And then that will also feed into our community of practice. So once you are here, please make sure that you relay the information to your people so that when the time comes, we can actually use them. Mahloud, you go for your question.
Thank you. Good evening, colleagues. My question, mine is, and it slipped, I should have asked it last week. I just wanted to find out if if one completes a PG deep in property development, will they be allowed also to do engineering management as masters? Will that be allowed?
Okay, so I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I think the faculty registrar might be able to help you. I think it's a function of your transcripts, your background. Yeah, I'd see Prof. Rod probably come in for that. I'm not very sure if you can actually move.
Thank you very much, Prof, and thank you for your question, Matludi. I think it depends on which management are you referring to. There's a couple of PG dips in management. I know particularly like industrial. We've got a couple of industrial management PG dip packages that are offered, and that one is independent of discipline. As long as one has qualified with a full graduation honors, irrespective of discipline, management is not limited to our discipline. And industrial thinking, the aspects like lean engineering and lean startup approach are taught through some of the offerings we have here, and that's independent of background. But I think when you talk about engineering, it might just need to be very specific. Which type are you referring to? And some may have blockages, but if it's the industrial one, it's open to everybody who's just thinking around lean approach to managerial strategy approach. I hope that answers your question. Over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, and also, Mahlodi, please just send me an email, and I'm also make sure that we link you up to the faculty. But like as Rodney have also said, and masters in management, there are people within the civil group that also do it. MIA, like you talked about, also do it, and even in your school, construction economics management. Now, let me quickly make this announcement because we are over time. On the 20th of April, we'll be having Professor Ivan Hofseya. He will be talking about research and new knowledge in postgraduate education. And on the 4th of May, we'll be having Professor Imhotep Alagidede. He will be talking about finishing your degree in record time. The reason why we chose this particular professor for this section is that from 2016 to 2021, he graduated 27 PhDs. He walked the talk, and most of the students went on to win several awards and all that. The reason why we are doing all these things and we are focusing the first half of the year on professors within the VIT community is to show you that there are people doing it within our own backyard, so we can leverage from them. And then when we move to the second block, that's where we'll be having an international group of people to come talk to us, and then we can have a bit of the feel. And so I believe that today you've learned a lot from Professor Kola, which means that please continue to engage with your colleagues and with your friends and help them to join us and help them. And also, if you don't have access to ADU content site, after this webinar, please do send me a message and then I will be able to link you up to it. May I also say I've noted you, Prof. Genga, but may I also say that please, we have put a link to the in the chat box for you to. We need your feedback. This helps us to tailor the thing that we do here to make sure that we are giving you value for money. Prof. Genga, please go for it, and then we can close.
Thank you very much. It's value for no money. You don't have to pay. Just one thing, I've been battling whether to comment on this or not, but I think I will bring it up here. And maybe it's to Desmond and the team behind postgraduate or postgraduate student preparation, the concept of resiliency. It's something that it's something I'd really like to share, and I hope my colleagues can also just chime in on that as well. This journey will test you, especially if you want to do something renowned, something new, something that will make an impact and a difference. It will push you, and I know there's work balance. You will find there will be times you will not balance. You will push yourself to aspects you might not be prepared to go. But I can tell you the rewards are beyond your own level of appreciation at this juncture. When you put out something that is new, something that will be able to make a new contribution to the philosophy within which you are, within which you find yourself in. Your name is immortalized under that concept. And it's not just bits, it is you. Wherever you go, whether you publish your work, whether you put out publications, it is your contribution to humanity. This is, when we talk about decolonization, this is what it is. There's different ways to do it. This is another way. So you will push yourself. There'll be nights you will not sleep. There'll be times you will go crazy. Yes, there'll be times you will not get along with your supervisor, but you will bear this and you will push through. And I just encourage you to go through some of these because they'll make you better at the end. So just hang in there and push. Resiliency is this. I know he talked about the thread in his research. I can tell you this is the thread through this profession, beyond, not even just here, but beyond. The ability to just be resilient and push. So do not underestimate it. Push yourself when you're down. Get your peers to pick you up. You might find yourself crying. You might just find yourself down. But I'm telling you, anyone who's walked this journey knows it will push you. But when you get on the other side, the contribution you will make will be beyond any of the tears you've gone through. So I wish you all the best. And I hand over to Prof. Kola and Dr. Clenham to close. Thank you.
Prof. Kola, your parting words?
Well, thanks very much, everyone, for joining. It's beautiful to share insights with colleagues and students, and so it's been a very fruitful time. And it's just coincidence that I did mention people from the business school, and now quickly they finished their research. And coincidentally now, Desmond is saying that Professor Paul Imhotep Alagadede will be coming to speak to you. Guys, if you missed that, I can tell you are missing a big style, because I know Professor Alagadede, I know a few of his students. They are not rushed, but then they are given the adequate support. And I think these students also are self-motivated. So many of his students are even becoming associate professors already. So these are things that I know. So don't miss that. And I can tell you also, for those of you that started writing, there is no way you would not have heard about Onwe Bozier and Leash. Those guys, I'm shocked that they only have 91,000. I think I've read these works like 1,000 times. If you have the privilege of having someone like Prof. Tony come to speak to you and you miss it, perhaps research is not for you. So guys, please don't miss these 2 webinars. And of course, I hope to catch up with you. I'm so sure you can get my details. If you need anything, you can email me. I want to wish you all the very best in your research journey. And like Rod has said, don't feel despair. Everybody went through it, but you don't have to suffer alone. It's not meant to be difficult, but if you find yourself having difficult times, know that 1, it's part of the journey. Secondly, there is help always around. Thank you. I wish you all the very best. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. I would end by telling you a short story. So a violinist played 45 minutes on a New York subway, and only 4 people stopped, and 1 even clapped for him. And then he managed to raise about $20. But the following night, this same violinist played in one of the most recognized stages in the world, and he charged a minimum of $1,000 per night. He filled the entire room. This experiment proves something, that extraordinary in an ordinary environment does not shine. It is not always recognized. There are brilliant professionals who do not receive reward according to their potentials. Once they arm themselves with value and leave this kind of environment, they thrive and grow. When a person is not in the right atmosphere, people will not be able to walk by their side and not even see how exceptional they are. just please make sure that you gather yourself in the right atmosphere, look for the right people, and make sure that you can give this your research a voice. You can do this. VITS will give you the edge. They say VIT for good. Let's go out there and make good on what we have gotten over here. Remember, it is Julius Mwalimu Nyerere who says that it is just like a village trying to give one person food to go to the next town and bring more food. But if you squander it and you go and you don't bring more food, you have betrayed everyone. You are getting this solid information. These are common sense, not commonly practiced. Live here, be empowered, and be poised for action, knowing very well that your degree can contribute to changing the socioeconomic challenges we face as a continent. On this note, I thank you all for coming, and I will see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now.
Cheers.